I'm William Kumwembe with Business Time. This is a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And coming up in the program today, we take a deeper look at the growing crisis of working poverty in Malawi, where millions of people are employed yet unable to meet basic living costs. Also in the program, we review performance of the Malawi Stock Exchange as figures show that shares worth 43.4 billion kwacha exchanged hands from January 2026 to date. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome in our main story in the program today. We take a deeper look at the growing crisis of working poverty in Malawi, where millions of people are employed yet unable to meet living costs. This comes as about 70% of the population, employed youth precisely, remain in extreme poverty. The situation threatens the nation's capacity to achieve its development goals under the Malawi 2063, which places stronger emphasis on human capital development, industrialization, and wealth creation. Through deeply personal accounts of workers in Blantyre earning as little as 120,000 against a monthly cost of living nearing 1 million kwacha, journalist Benedetta Chuandamia exposes a widening gap between wages and survival.
At just 27, Madalitso Gama should be building a future for his young family. But instead, every month is a calculation of survival. Earning 120,000 kwacha as a warehouse assistant in Blantyre, the father of one says his household needs at least 300,000 kwacha to get by. The gap is not just financial, it is psychological.
Every day is a struggle. I have a wife and a daughter. The money that I receive is very little to sustain my family. Sometimes I would miss work to do some pieceworks to supplement my income. When I look at my daughter and the struggle I am experiencing, I am always worried about what kind of a future she will have.
Gama is not unemployed. He is working, and like millions of Malawians, that is no longer enough. Across Blantyre's densely populated townships, similar stories unfold of people waking up each day to work, yet sinking deeper into hardship. For Emmanuel Patson, a general worker from Maketa, employment has not translated into stability. Earning 150,000 kwacha a month, he supports a family of 4, pays 40,000 kwacha in rent, and struggles to meet daily needs.
In the past, we could at least afford basic needs, but now life is hard because of high cost of living. So mostly we survive through getting loans.
Two children in primary school, Patson says the future feels uncertain.
The future looks gloomy. My kids are still young and they go to school. I don't know if I'll be able to pay their school fees. Even though primary and secondary education is free, there are other costs that we cannot avoid.
For Jacob Zolongoti, a 44-year-old security guard who has worked for over 25 years, the story is no different. Despite earning 230,000 kwacha and running a small barbershop to supplement his income, survival remains elusive.
I started working in the 2000s in different companies. Life is still hard, and mostly I rely on small-scale businesses to support my family. My salary is around 230,000 kwacha before tax. But after paying bills, what remains only lasts about a week. The rest of the month, we survive through debt.
Their experiences reflect a broader national reality. In February 2026, the cost of living for an average urban household of 6 stood at 981,732 kwacha per month. far beyond the reach of most workers. At the same time, Malawi's poverty rate remains high, with 75.4% of the population living below the World Bank's revised international poverty line of $3, which is about 5,253 kwacha per day per person. For many households, survival has become a daily negotiation between income and basic needs. What is emerging is a shift in the nature of poverty itself, as Malawi's crisis is no longer defined solely by unemployment, but by working poverty. On paper, Malawi appears to have one of the lowest youth unemployment rates in Africa, but deeper analysis tells a different story. Data from the Africa Youth Employment Clock shows that while 54.5% of young people aged 15 to 35 are employed, the majority remain trapped in poverty. Among them, 71.1% are classified as extremely poor, 13.8% as moderately poor, and only 15.1% as not poor. This means that for most young Malawians, having a job does not guarantee a pathway out of poverty. Instead, work has become a trap within it. The private sector, often seen as the engine of job creation, is itself struggling. Employers Consultative Association of Malawi Executive Director George Kaki says businesses needs a more enabling environment to grow and create decent jobs.
There are lots of things that we can say should be done, but often most talked is that we should ensure that we have an environment that favors the creation and growth of businesses. We need to ensure that we have a thriving micro, small and medium sector that will drive growth, that will drive businesses in Malawi.
Malawi's demographic structure adds urgency to the crisis, putting a generation at risk. With a population of about 22 million, half of whom are under the age of 18, and projections suggesting it could double by 2050, the demand for jobs is set to rise sharply. More than 50% of Malawians are under 30, making the country one of the youngest populations in the world. This youth budge presents both an opportunity and a risk, whereby without meaningful employment opportunities, it could become a source of economic strain and social instability. Meanwhile, efforts are underway to address the mismatch between education and labor market demands. Technical, Entrepreneurial and Vocational Education and Training Authority, TVETA, through Public Relations Officer Carol Magreta, says technical and vocational training is key to improving youth employability in decent jobs.
Technical, entrepreneurial, and vocational education and training skills play a critical role because they equip young people with practical, hands-on skills that are directly aligned to labor market demands. TVET empowers youth not only to seek employment, but also to create jobs through entrepreneurship. Several strategic interventions are already underway. We are developing more curriculum while also reviewing existing ones to ensure that we increase the trade options that learners have when they get into TVET institutions, while also narrowing the skills gap between the skills that TVET graduates have and the skills that the industry is looking for.
Malawi's long-term development blueprint, Malawi 2063, places strong emphasis on human capital development, industrialization, and wealth creation. Central to this vision is a productive, empowered youth population capable of driving economic transformation. But the realities on the ground tell a different story. With millions of young people either unemployed or trapped in low-paying and unstable work, the foundation required to achieve these ambitions is increasingly fragile. Meanwhile, government identifies labor and youth development among key drivers of Malawi's sustainable and prosperous future. Delivering his sona in Parliament in February this year, President Peter Mutharika described labor as one of Malawi's key resources. As such, Mutharika said his government will prioritize community colleges and resume constructing colleges that were abandoned, as well as continue with graduate internship program. Mutharika said his government will also allocate 100 million kwacha soft loans for the youth in every constituency every year, starting in the 2026-27 financial year.
Speaker, sir, labor is one of Malawi's most valuable resources. As such, my government will, one, prioritize community colleges and resume constructing colleges that were abandoned. Two, continue with the graduate internship program. And three, allocate 1 million soft loans, 1 million kwacha soft loans for the youth in every constituency every year.
Without decent jobs, income growth remains limited. Without income, domestic demand weakens. And without a thriving workforce, industrialization becomes difficult to sustain. For Gama, the implications of these challenges are deeply personal, as each day he reports for work, not with assurance of progress, but with the hope of survival. In a country where work no longer guarantees dignity, the promise of prosperity remains uncertain, not just for him, but for a generation meant to build Malawi's future.
The Malawi Stock Exchange maintained its positive outturn in the first quarter of 2026 with over 88 million shares worth 43.4 billion kwacha exchanging hands from January to date. However, the market navigated turbulence triggered by the introduction of the capital gains tax by the government, which was later reversed. For an insight into the local boss performance, journalist Chimwemwe Mangazi has the whole story, and he caught up with the Chief Executive Officer for the Malawi Stock Exchange, John Kamanga.
In the month of January, especially January and February, the market was quite active, especially looking at in terms of actually the tax issues which actually came into force. That's the capital gains tax. There was lots of uncertainty within the market. However, through the lobbying with the Minister of Finance and actually taking heed in terms of our submission, the impact of the capital gains tax on the operation of the stock market, we have seen that at least the Minister of Finance has actually waived that, and we have been introduced by a new tax which we call a final withholding tax of 2% on the sales proceeds. That has also ignited lots of excitement from the investing community. So I would say that there have been lots of receptions from the investing community in terms of the new tax. However, looking in terms of the way, last year we closed quite high, and now with the uncertainty which was actually brought in within the first 3 months, I would say, of this year, we saw an element of actually volume picking up, but at a lower price. Because what happens that the stock market in terms of price is determined by forces of demand and supply. So the market forces actually come into play. So we saw that at least there was a loss of actually sales in the market. As a result of that, because the supply was excessive, we saw the price actually going down. For example, now if you look at in terms of the way we have performed, we have seen that at least the market has done quite well in terms of volume. From January to 24th, about 20th of March, we have traded around about 88 million in terms of shares, which means in terms of volume, value is about 43.4 billion Malawi kwacha. And also in terms of trades, we have done about 10,193 number of transactions which has actually traded on the stock market. So you can see that in terms of volume as well as value, it has been quite high. However, in terms of now the average market price as measured by the mass, we're slightly down by about 3.52%. This actually signifies in terms of actually the excessive supply which we had in the market, because most of the people, they were trying actually to, I would say, to realign their portfolios as a result of actually the introduction of the capital gains tax. And now that we have seen most of people also now coming in, We believe that as we go along, the market will pick up because you remember we're at around about 5%, we went to about 4%, now we're at around 3.5%. So we believe that as we go along, at least the market will pick up because we're going to the period whereby most of the companies that are now paying dividends based on the 2025 financial statements, which actually some have already started declaring in terms of what we call the second interim dividend, looking forward actually to the final dividend, which is going to be declared at the annual general meetings, which are actually coming around May, June, July, thereabout. So the market is, and the other good news which we have seen is that if you look at in terms of the money market, the interest rates have gone down to around about 12%. So you find that any investor will be looking at in terms of where should I put my money? Should I put in the short-term money market where the interest rate is now around 12%, or should I go into long-term whereby you find that at least the returns is going to be much higher?
Remember, this is Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. With me, William Kumwembe. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Authorities have called for meaningful collaboration between government and the private sector to enhance public service delivery and stimulate economic growth across the country. Public-Private Partnership Commission Chief Executive Officer Patrick Kabambe was speaking at an engagement with stakeholders in Blantyre on the Digital Malawi Acceleration Project. Benedetta Chwandamia was there and has the detail.
The meeting held in Blantyre focused on partnerships to roll out the first phase of the project under the Digital Malawi Acceleration Project, also known as DMAP, which is expected to expand internet access and improve delivery of public services, especially in underserved areas. Under the project, government plans to construct 100 cell towers and connect about 500 public institutions to affordable internet services this year. Principal Secretary for e-Government in the Ministry of Information and Communications Technology, Prosper Mopiwa, said the project will expand broadband coverage, making it easier for citizens to access government services online. This follows a directive by President Peter Mutharika for all ministries, departments and agencies to digitize their services.
So this is also in line with the directive that was given by the President of the Republic of Malawi. And for us as a government responsible for the provision of ICTs for every single Malawian, we've taken this as a step. And this step is the one route that is going to provide this connectivity that the President has emphasized on. And also at the same time, once the connectivity has been done, we are going to provide government services through that connectivity. And the objective is that every single Malawian that is in the rural area should not be able to travel all the way from there to respective headquarters of government service providers. We're talking about the immigration department, we're talking about road traffic and others that provide the government services to citizens of Malawi. We're saying that it's high time that we now go to them, provide them with these services where they stay, and not make them travel all the way from wherever they stay at. So this is also in line with the directive that the President of the Republic of Malawi, Professor Peter Mutharika, had given us in his SONA speech, and we're just merely implementing his vision.
The Public-Private Partnership Commission, PPC, which is implementing the project, says the initiative will improve efficiency in both public and private service delivery. PPPC Chief Executive Officer Patrick Kabambe says groundwork has already been completed, including identifying tower sites and institutions to be connected. Kabambe adds that bids from private sector players will be invited between April and May this year.
Today we have a meeting with private players who we are partnering with in order to ensure that this delivery is achieved. We're looking at supporting installation of cell towers in hard-to-reach areas. We're looking at about 100 that will be done this year. But we're also looking at connecting over 500 public institutions so that they have access to cheap, reliable internet services that will support the digitization agenda of government. So this is why today we're meeting the private sector, because the private sector are better placed to deliver these services. In the presentation today, we've explained the process that we have gone through to identify the 100 sites that will have these cell towers. We've also explained the selection criteria for the 500 public institution sites. All the groundwork has been done, and we will be calling for bids in the months of April, May from private sector to give us proposals on how they can deliver this. So if we get these bids, if we do that bids in April, May, we can be assured that within this year, the rollout will begin.
The 5-year Digital Malawi Acceleration Project, which started in October 2024, is being supported by a $150 million World Bank grant. Out of this, $25 million has been allocated for this year's connectivity rollout.
Now, in other business news, we look at how Malawi has been unable to make the most of the development budgets despite effort invested in the areas that need some transformative movements. Sectors like health, education, agriculture seem to be receiving a substantial amount, but the efforts do not tally the resources that are being pushed into such endeavors. Journalist Chimwemwe Mangazi has the whole story.
Between the 2017-18 and 2022-23 financial years, approved development budgets grew significantly from 336 billion kwacha to nearly 800 billion kwacha, reflecting the government's stated ambition to invest in infrastructure, agriculture, health, and education. However, actual expenditure consistently fell far short of these allocations. For example, in the 2020-21 financial year, about 637 billion kwacha was allocated as development budget, but only 377 billion kwacha worth projects were actualized. Africa Institute of Corporate Citizenship Head of Programs Henry Mlinde says the trend exposes a deeper structural failure in how public resources were being managed.
It's so sad when you look at the current sitting in the parliament. Different MDAs are trying to push for increase in the budget allocation. But when you look back at the development budget, has been underutilized for the past years, and the trend is worrisome. And most important, the victim is the citizen. We're talking about people in the rural areas, in hard-to-reach areas that have been denied of their right to development. So I think this indication by Auditor General report in terms of underutilization of development fund, it's really not good news for our development in as far as we're concerned. I think, in my view, we need to reflect before we talk about increasing budget allocation. Let's look back and see how these ministries and the department and agencies have performed before we think about increasing their budget, because there are still gaps which has to be addressed. I'll give you an example. Procurement issues. In as far as we're allocating funds towards procurement of maybe development projects, but the departments are having challenges in terms of procurement. And not only that, even the accountability. You find that they're not even doing expenditure according to the stipulated procedures. In this case, my point would be, let's sit back first of all and reflect our capacity as the procurement agencies, MDAs, and other actors to make sure that the capacity of controlling officers have been built, to make sure that the funds allocated to such developments have been utilized accordingly.
Betha Chikadza is Economics Association of Malawi president.
What we noted with the report is that there are several reasons for this, which we can call underutilization of over $1 trillion in development funds across the ministries. I can see the report highlights, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs, and also Education and National Local Government Financing Committee. But if you look at it clearly, I think the government cannot just let funds remain idle in their accounts. Most of the times, funds tend to be allocated, but because of some environments which happen within the ministries, maybe the funds end up being moved to support other institutions or other projects. For example, this normally happens in the Ministry of Agriculture, where probably because they may be under budgeted on AIP, and they've seen that there is a project probably which has other money, they can actually take money from that. I think a very good example is the last year when we saw that the government increased AIP recipients, or is it FISP recipients, up to 1 million something. Where will that money come from? Should be via means from other projects. I think another reason is that most of the times when they are budgeting, they even include projects which have not yet started, but they are going to start within the budgeting period. And by including, for example, maybe we can take an example of Millennium Challenge account, that project. People started budgeting and they put the money in the account, like, okay, I think this is going to come, not in the accounts, but in the budget. But along the way, you saw that the project got cancelled. So I think now to go back to recollect that this money did not materialize, it actually looks as unspent.
A recent Auditor General's report consistently flagged irregular payments, missing documentation, procurement inefficiencies, and misallocation of funds as recurring problems within ministries, departments, and agencies.
Well, that story also brings us to the end of today's edition of the program, Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. My name is William Kumwembe. On behalf of the entire production team, thank you for watching, but always remember, if it doesn't make money, then it doesn't make sense. Stay safe and goodbye for now.